Good afternoon. How are you? Well, it's in the 70s, so it's pretty comfortable out, and it's not windy, and but it'll probably be dropping to 40 tonight. So that's my report for the Jefferson Weather Report. So, how are things going? Well, we have two significant things that reflect the weakness of our nation. One is, of course, in Maine, where this man who actually taught how to use arms, and I think is in the reserves, killed 18 people and perhaps injured more that we don't know about. And he went to places of leisure, so it's not clear whom he was targeting, if he was targeting anyone, but I guess in the days ahead we'll know that. And we've heard our fair share of people saying things like thoughts and prayers. Somebody said we should get those responsible. And I agree with that, but I think they were just talking about the shooter. And the shooter appears to have had some sort of perhaps mental breakdown, and it sounds like schizophrenia, but all of this analysis doesn't do anything because the persons that we should be getting are the ones who've done not a damn thing about gun regulation, gun safety. And these weapons are powerful. I don't normally have any reason to lift up and shoot an AK-47, but I did go out to, one of these security places now years ago, and I had ATF with me, and we loaded up a bunch of these AK-47s. There were several people with me, and we shot with them. And this is the feeling I had with it. It was like you were holding a hose, and there was a continuous stream of these destructive, destructive forces coming one after the other. And once the train of these things hit the target, it was like you were connected to the target. And the destructive force was amazing. Now we know this logically, we know this intellectually. And still we have people in America talking about, don't touch my guns, I deer hunt. I don't know why anybody has to do that. I could understand it if you couldn't get food and couldn't do it any other way. And I have no reason to participate in that. For one thing, I don't want to kill animals. And I also don't want to kill people. So why are we so different when we say this? It's clear by our actions that we really don't give a damn about children. And we don't care about people we don't know. We want somebody to be able to slap in their hand a piece of metal that could destroy someone else without any limitations, under any circumstances. Who are these people? And why are we not stopping them? There are more of us, meaning people who live in situations without weapons, who have no reason to use them, and still people are dying. So the rule of thumb these days should be, if not only did you want to overthrow our government, you want to run around shooting people, because that's your Second Amendment right. And I've written articles and studied it, and perhaps you have as well. And so the Second Amendment had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with a personal right to have arms. And Supreme Court justices railed against those opinions that said otherwise, as they were retired at the time, and couldn't believe that people would say, oh yeah, it's a personal right to have a gun. In New York, where I was a prosecutor, I saw over the years people who had guns, and it was illegal because of the so-called Sullivan Law that prohibited having these guns. But the person who had the gun, who had no training, almost always ended up on the wrong end of their own firearm. They brought a gun to a robbery that might never have involved personal risk or safety compromised by the offending party. But you'll find someone, if you bring it up at a party, who'll say, well, what if you have a home invasion? Well, my answer to that usually is, how many of you had? And you don't. It's the least efficient way to steal. And burglary makes so much more sense. You're not involved with someone else, and taking a weapon immediately puts you in a felony murder rule. But that's, it gets more complicated. So what are we going to do about it? The same thing that we're going to do to get rid of these people that want to overthrow our government. We don't elect them. Do not elect any Republican. Do not elect any Democrat who's for guns. I don't care who they are. None of them should be elected. You're familiar with the gunfight at the OK Corral, right? And aside from the 25 movies probably that have had it in it in some tortured way or other, the bottom line was the reason that they had that gunfight at the OK Corral was that was outside of town. And you weren't allowed to have guns in the town. This is the Wild West. Wild West had better gun laws than we have today. And so they all shot at each other at the OK Corral. Okay to shoot guns. So, as a kid in the Bronx, one day there was one of our guys, we went out to Orchard Beach. We called it Horseshit Beach. I was probably a little unfair, I don't know. I haven't been there in a long time, but it seemed to be kind of a dirty beach. And I think I was a lifeguard there for a while at one point. But one day a whole bunch of us went out to the beach. And, we went swimming and stuff like that. And when we came back, one of our number got arrested. And this is what he did. And I suppose we were in our teens somewhere. There are these houses in the Bronx, picturesque tenements, I called them as a kid. And I felt like they were. They were attractive to me, red brick, fire escapes. And some of them have a courtyard in which the building inside, in a circle, goes out sometimes, and there's a pole, and people have a clothesline to that pole. And apparently this guy who was with us had a fight with his parents, and he had some sort of rifle. And an older woman reached out the window to put out her laundry to dry, and this guy shot her, and apparently she fell into the courtyard and she died. Now, you could have knocked any of us over with a feather to think he would do that. We had, as kids, you had fist fights in the Bronx. You played in the streets. You played ball up against the wall. You don't know who has it in them to do something like that. And going from the relative pea shooter he had to the AK-47 I shot, or the AR-15, or any of these weapons, law is supposed to be the substitute for violence. Peace is one of the objectives, that we find a way to disagree among ourselves in ways other than shooting each other. Now, there are those who test the outer limits of how that's possible, but there it is. Another thing that we can't ignore, and I've heard some, maybe many journalists say this, is that we traded McCarthy, who was a bad leader, to someone who is more intimate and favored by Trump. Why don't the Republicans see that as a bad move? And then the Republicans in the Republican conference didn't think to exercise whatever power or authority they had to stop that. And the answer was there all the time. It was a coalition government. I've got a donkey nearby. I don't usually take this path, but I'm still trying to walk on paths that don't have great inclines one direction or other, and I'm not supposed to go out too long. And next week I see my doctor, and we'll see what he tells me. So, pardon for the donkey digression, but the Democrats are the party of the donkeys, and the elephants are the party of the Republicans, and those kind of happy days in which these kinds of models are kicked around are not as much fun when you have one party that really doesn't believe in our Constitution, if you can believe Mitt Romney, who said that's what they tell him, and that kind of fits when you have so many members of Congress or the Senate basically trying to overthrow an election. And so on some level, they want to achieve things that they know the people don't want. Because why else would you want to overthrow the government and make it an autocracy, a monarchy, ruled by a few? And that can only end with, who's king of the hill? Somebody stands up there and throws one person down and then throws another person down, and that's about where they are. How do you think they achieved, quote, unity for the party to have a speaker? They took these people out back and they told them in no uncertain terms what terrible things would happen to them, about their assignments on the Hill, the primaries they'd have, what they'd spread in their communities about them, things they know that they may have been keeping just for this kind of force. I had a friend, I still do, he's an elected representative, and he wanted me to run several years ago for the state General Assembly down in Richmond. And I did think about it, but I had a lot of cases I was interested in. I was doing things that I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure I wanted to get off the bench and like at a game and get into the matter. And while this was going back and forth, I saw a picture of him. In fact, I took the picture of him being corralled by, let's just call him a leader of an interest group. And he was dressing down this experienced legislator, whom I have a lot of respect for, who I know is pushing back because he's that kind of a person. But it was almost physical. I don't know if you've seen the old picture of Lyndon Baines Johnson standing tall over a senator, leaning over him with one hand on him so he can't get away, and pushing him to do whatever it was he wanted done. And if you've ever heard the tapes of Lyndon Baines Johnson plotting both good and bad plots, you have some idea of how physical, quote, civil leadership is in a legislative body. And this takes us back to the pleas the last couple of days too. People pleading to survive. Okay, I understand it. But can they reform? And there's evidence that often they don't. They're pretty cheeky. So, what do we have ahead of us? What we have ahead of us is a continuous push to restore the republic and to have a democracy that does render leaders in that Republican form of government representing us that is for the good of the republic and not to destroy it, that cares about the people and will exercise to do something, that really believes that instead of just saying we're upset about gunfire, that we do something to stop it, that we actually do save children instead of saying we care about them. They're used for everything. Oh, we're doing this to save the children. We're doing this to save the children. Well, you're really not. That's just become a talking point that works. Because real people care about kids, and they find it hard to believe that somebody should be so craven as to say, oh, we're going to take care of the kids. So, anyhow, I'm glad to be out talking to you. And tomorrow, I'm writing paper. I've been writing paper all week. I don't know if you realize Gibbons spent a lot of time writing, and one time they asked the King of England what he thought of Gibbons. And he said, scribble, scribble, scribble. Well, my scribblings don't amount to as much in volume as Gibbons did, but I do a fair amount of it. And I enjoy it, but it's kind of hard work. Hemingway said of his fiction writing that writing was easy. He would just sit there, cut open his veins, and let it run out of him. So, with all these images popping through my brain. I'm going to say goodbye to you for the evening, and I'm sorry we don't have that many trees around me, but maybe next week we will. Bye-bye.